Okay, today we're going to talk about Photoshop and get started in that and start dipping our toe in the software. And this is the most user-friendly software that we're going to use. The others are you're going to build confidence with this one, and then the other ones will be easier because of it. Because if we started with like Illustrator, you probably all would go drop, and go to a different class because Illustrator can be pretty complex. Okay, so I want to just review a little bit from what we said on Tuesday. Remember that raster and vector are very important things to remember in these softwares, mainly because Photoshop is raster, and raster is the dots that make up the images. And with CMYK there, although we're going to be working in RGB in Photoshop, because RGB is the native mode for Photoshop. And there are a lot of things that you can't do in Photoshop if you were in a CMYK mode. So really CMYK would be a final thing that you would do right before you send it to a printer. When I say printer, I'm talking commercial printer. If you send it to a printer like that over there on the counter, you wouldn't have to make that switch. The only time you'd make that switch is if you were sending it to a high quality commercial printer. Okay, so how does raster is affected by how does raster how do the pixels affect Photoshop? I'll get it right in a minute. Sorry, this is a photograph of one of my dear little kitties, and I really love this photograph. She posed all the time for me. Anyway, I've enlarged her whiskers and I've blown it up on this side so you can see the actual pixels. And so you can't get this cat to be on the side of the barn. You can't use this photograph. It'll read okay from a distance, but if you get up really close, you're going to be seeing all the pixels. So Photoshop is resolution bound. Whereas Illustrator is vector and it's not resolution bound. Okay, moving on to Photoshop. I have a rule for myself that I never do any text in Photoshop. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Number one, I think the most overwhelming reason is because with Photoshop, you can have a gazillion layers inside of your file, but you can only do one file at a time. The other softwares we're going to be using, you can have 5, 6, 20, 100, 1,000 pages in those. So like if you were going to lay out a book, or if you had some kind of thing that had more than one page, in Photoshop, you would have to do one file, then a second file, and a third file, and those files would be humongous. And unless you were really, really careful, they might get in the wrong order so that whenever you have them printed, it might not come out the way you expect. There was one time that someone was working on a book, and I got the misfortune of helping them put it together and get it printed. And they had done all of their work in Photoshop. And I'm talking text for a book. It was a disaster because if you used it as it was going to compress the file and the pixels were going to show up. But at the same time, they were just this big bag of files. It was really hard. And so that's the number one reason not to use Photoshop and text. The number two reason is because whenever you've got a straight edge, like the N or the T or most of these letters, except for the 0, it'll be okay, kind of, as long as you've got pretty thick text, it's bold like this is. But if you were to get really close to that 0, that O, you're going to see this kind of stuff. So if you were to blow it up really big, you're going to have some fuzzy text is what you're going to have. Now, there is a text button in Photoshop, but I don't want you to really use it. So anyway, we can discuss more on the maybe you can break the rules sometimes, but for now, let's just say no text in Photoshop. Okay, so Illustrator is vector, and you can do text in that. Okay, so Photoshop, what we're going to do today is we are going to work on a few tools, but we're also going to look around and kind of take a tour of the software. We're going to look at the settings. Not really something you would mess with every time, but say you got a new computer, or if you upgraded and somehow your settings didn't follow the new update, you might want to know where that is so you can get it back to where you want it to be. We're going to make a new document. We're going to look at the menu pull down called the menu pull down called window. And the reason that that's important, and I'm pulling that one out, is because if you can't find a tool or you can't find a panel that you need desperately to do what you want, you can always go to window in the menu pull down and you can find it because it lists all the different functions, all the different tools. It has everything in it. So if you get lost, window is kind of your map. So we're going to talk about the panels and the different functions with those and the tools. But the actual tools, the specific tools we're going to work on today are these. We're going to crop and touch up. We're going to make photographs look better by using levels and curves and brightness. Okay, so before we go on, remember your your shortcuts. I mainly want you to focus on file and edit. Those are the ones that are going to help you very most. And that way you don't have to absolutely remember every single thing at the beginning. And really those shortcuts will also help you in any of the software that you might be using. Okay, the tools. We're going to talk about the move tools, the crop tools, the healing brushes, and the clone stamp tools. So we're not going to go over all of them. We'll learn those as we get to them. But for right now, those three areas. But before we start, I want to talk about the thumb drives I gave you. How many of you have an organization system in your computer and you keep it organized so you can find things really easily? How many of you do that? All right, I mean, if there's a few hands, that's good. Because when I first started working on a computer, it was kind of like, okay, well, let's just throw it over here. Let's just throw it over here. And I was looking for files all the time. I never could find what I needed. But if you start working in a professional setting, you're going to find out that everybody organizes their files. And if they don't, they're probably the one that everybody thinks is really not very good worker. And if you share files, if you're working off of a shared drive or a shared server or whatever, or a shared cloud window, you're going to need to be organized in the way that everybody else is organized. So it's inevitable. You're going to have to organize your files, whether you do or not. Okay. So I'm gonna skip this for a second. Oops. Oh, I guess I'll go ahead and go this way. No, let's not do that. I'm sorry. I'm just not organized right now. I need to organize. If I can move these over. Let's see. Let me stop the share for a second. And I want to share. Okay. Let me get back to this. Okay, now I'm sharing the right screen. Okay. So this is the screen that I'm sharing. And so I'm going to open up Photoshop. So all of you go ahead and open up Photoshop on your computers. While y'all are doing that, I think I'm going to take a roll. This is kind of an unnatural thing for me to do, but with it being so early, I decided to do it. Ryan? Sharon? Daniel? Carly? Here. Trevor? Yeah, I'm not pointing that. Did anybody done this anybody? All right. So I'm hoping you have Photoshop open by now. And what I want you to do is I want you to go up to Window. Now, this is the one I was just talking about a minute ago. This is kind of the roadmap for everything. So click it and hold the click so that the window menu is still out. So go to Workspace. I want us to all be on the same workspace so that whenever I show you something up here, it'll look really similar to what you've got on your computer, because you can absolutely make this anything that you want it to be. You can have only the tools out that you want and so on and so on. But for right now, let's all get on the same one. I think Essentials is generally the default, and it says default, so it must be. So I want to just reset Essentials so that it just takes it back to square one. Okay, and make sure you've got the tools that I've got here. And I'm assuming you'll have those because there's really not that much of a choice. You can add more tools, but this is kind of the default, and that's plenty fine for what we're doing. Okay, so now I'm going to see if I can minimize that. Yes. Okay, so have all of you got your USB thumb drives plugged in?
I need to do one. Mine is there.
Oh, you're still not able to get it to work?
Yeah, it like saves, but it says the file is like messed up. I did. I tried that computer first, and then that computer said the USB was messed up when I plugged it in. But on this one, it doesn't say it's messed up. But whenever I try to open up something, I'll show you. It's messed up.
Well, what are, yes, ma'am. It's not working on your computer.
This is my first.
USB thing was gonna, or one of these over here, whatever you want to do, but I thought the USB thing was gonna be perfect. I didn't realize that all this. Well, it's not working.
I haven't tried yet. Oh, I get the same.
So let's go ahead and go forward and then we'll work on whenever you get booted up, we'll work on that. Okay. So what I want to do is to show you what I do with a disc whenever it's mine. First of all, you click on it and it highlights that name. If you click on the name again, it changes colors. Y'all have all used thumb drives before, right? Yes? No? Okay, well, I'm just going to go through as if nobody's ever used one before. So I apologize if I'm being boring right now. But what I want you to do is I want you to name your disc so that, let's say, for some reason, they'll all throw your discs up in the air and they land all different places. You'll still be able to identify your bird. It'll still have your name on it. Okay? So change it to a different name, to your name or whatever you want to name it. Okay. If you double click it, it opens up, as you all know that. And I'm going to show you how I personally, I'm going to show you how I personally do my own organization. Okay, first of all, in the desktop, there's 3 different ways you can show the files. You can do the icon, you can do a list, or you can do as columns, which means the column means that if you click on one of these first folders in the first column, it shows what's inside of it, and so on like that. And I mean, you can keep going until it finally is just one file or something. Okay. I prefer myself, and this will be a personal preference for you guys. I know a lot of people who use columns. I know some that use icons. I prefer lists. Don't ask me why, I just feel more comfortable with it. I guess because there's not as much clutter and that sort of thing. So whenever I have something that I really want to keep super organized, because I am not an organized person. So this is the way I do things. Like this is the presentations for the class. As I'm about to present them, I drag them onto my desktop so that I can get to them really easily. And instead of just saying week 1, week 2, or something like that, I put a 01, a 02, because sometimes they won't be in order. Like if you click name up here in the menu, you can reorganize them. So you can switch them from oldest to newest or to newest to oldest. You can also get them by date modified. You can see which one you were working in last or the one you were working in the longest ago. And for instance, let's see if I can find something here. Nope. Okay, I'm going to try this one. Okay, so now I've got a folder and I've got InDesign. I've got all kinds of different files in this one. I can also get them organized by the kind. And now this one, of course, has only got a few different kinds of files in it, but you can organize all the PDFs together, all the PNGs, all the InDesign files, all the folders, so that you can switch it around so you can actually find what you're looking for. So the reason I'm telling you all this is because I want to help you get started being a little more organized with your files. Because I know that sometimes you might leave everything in the downloads, you might leave everything on your desktop, but if you get organized with all your classes, with all the notes and files and assignments and everything, you'll have more time. It's just part of that organization of your life. So I don't care how you do it. You can do week 1, week 2, whatever you want to do, but I'm just encouraging you to have a folder and then some different things underneath it for that particular class. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm not going to make you do that right now. I'm going to let you do that on your own time. Let's see, Photoshop. Well, I've lost it. There we go. I'm going to have to move this down a little bit because that all of the Zoom stuff is hiding a lot of things. Okay, so I am going to go back to it opened a file, but it's really not a file. I'm going to go to home. That's what I need to do. Okay, so this is the welcome screen. This is where you can create a new file with the touch of a button, or you can open an existing file. And you can also see all the files that you worked on recently. No comments on my selection of photographs because I do work on some weird things. But anyway, you can also organize this by the most recent, by size, by name, by all different kinds of ways so that you can find what it is that you want. So before we get started into making a new file or opening a file, I want to show you where the settings are. They used to call it preferences. So if I slip and say preferences, I'm talking about settings. I don't know why they continue to change things, but they do. Okay, so you click Photoshop 2025, just like that, and you'll have a drop-down menu. Go to settings and go over to general, and it opens up a new dialog thing here. So this is just if you want to use legacy and all this kind of stuff. I would really suggest on most of these leaving the default because there's really no reason to change most of them. Now there are some that do change. Interface. I change my interface because when I'm working on something, a project myself, I like to take it to that interface because I don't like all the bright light. I think that when you're working on a computer for hours and hours, if you have dimmer lights and you have a dimmer screen, you don't get nearly as much eye fatigue. Just me, but that eye fatigue is a real thing. And there are some others in between that. The reason I have it on the lightest, and if I'm wrong, y'all tell me because I would be glad to switch it. I feel like that y'all could probably see this version better at a distance because it's really hard to read far off something that's dark with the white letter. So if that's not working for you, let me know and I'll change it. But that's the reason I'm working here. I would suggest that y'all use a darker background. Have you got your started? Mouse. This one loose. The keyboard loose. Okay. So let's go. I'm not gonna go down all of these necessarily. Workspace, I would leave it like this. Now, history is a very important file. All of you are probably aware of metadata. That's generally how we leave that one. Let's see. Scratch disks. If you start running out of room, if you suddenly get an image, a warning that says you are out of memory, it means you're out of memory on your scratch disk. So if you're working on a computer that's got a lot of space and everything, you can come in here and you can actually change that. But I would definitely get somebody who knows what they're doing in order to do that because you might really mess something up. Units and rulers. I like it on inches because that's what I'm accustomed to. If you're a metric person, by all means, but everything I'm going to tell you is going to be in inches. And type is always going to be in points. Okay. Guides, plugins, type. That's pretty much everything. So let's just go ahead and say okay and close that. Okay, so now we're going to, if you wanted a new blank file, you would click here. But instead of that, I'm going to open a file because the thing about Photoshop is that in 90% of the cases, you start with something. You start with a photograph. Even if you're putting together, yes, ma'am. Did you have a question? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you were. No. Okay, I'm sorry. I just don't want to ignore anybody if they have a question. Photoshop file, you usually start with a bunch of pixels. You know, you've got a photograph, you may add more to it, you may take things away, but you start with something. So instead of starting with a blank screen, we're going to start with a filled up screen. So let's click open, and then you navigate to where your week 2 files are. And so here are my week 2 files. So I'm going to start with crop and touch up. Okay, so I open it up and I've got a window like this with all of my tools here, with all of my panels over here. You can see that some of them are squished together, and I'll show you how to open those up. But it's pretty much a layout that will stay the same. So up here, you've got a whole lot of controls that as you change from one tool to the next, those things up there change too. And it really is good, because that way you don't have to search for different things like any of these numbers that you want to change. You don't have to look for it. Okay, over here we have our panels. And so the biggest one is color right now. If you want to, you can move that and make it a lot smaller. And some of them are spring loaded. Like if I were to touch layers, all of a sudden I've got that popped up. And so let's look at layers first. Layers are just basically like if you had a desk, you started putting papers one on top of the other, those papers are layers. And the one that's on the bottom, as long as the top one is opaque, you can't see down to the bottom one. So we work with opaques and transparencies to make certain things show up. So right now we only have the one layer, and it's called background because that's the original file. That's what we brought in. And we really can't change it because it has a lock on it. So I'm going to just click on that lock and it disappears. Just a click and let go. And now we're going to be able to do things with it. And while I'm over here with the layers, there is an eye here. If you click it, it hides that layer. So that way you don't have to like delete a layer. You don't have to do any of those things. If you don't want to see that layer, all you have to do is click the eye and then re-click to get it back. Down here on the very bottom, the plus sign, it's a square with a plus. You click it and you make another layer. So now you've got this layer and you've got that layer, but this layer doesn't have anything in it. Now, if you want to get rid of a layer, you click, hold it, you can see it's got a little fist over it, and you drag it to the trash. And we also have one of those menus that we talked about on Tuesday. Those little lines, the 4 little lines, if y'all can see where my cursor is, right there. 4 lines. If you click that and hold it, it's going to have a menu pop out of it. So that if you don't like to drag and drop things in the trash, you can go to the menu and you can delete things, you can duplicate, you can export, you can do all kinds of different things because of that spring out menu. Okay, so now I'm going to come over to the photograph area. Right now I have this tool chosen, and it's the move tool. So since I've got it chosen, it has a line around it. It has dots on all the different corners and in the center. And so with that tool, what it does is it moves things. It moves things around. So now I've gotten it off center. And so what I need to do to get it back on center, I can either do a Command Z to undo, or I can go up to this little panel right here that's called History. If you click on it, it's got a bunch of little images on the side. It has 2 white boxes and then one that's filled in. And you can see everything you've done. It has every click you made, every choice you made right here on this menu. You wouldn't know that all the things that I was just doing, it wasn't very much, has a list that long. So if you go up here, it goes back to the very beginning. And down here, you can just click one at a time.
So I'm going to go back to open just to get it exactly where I want it. Okay. And oh, I told you about this tool. It moves things around. And let me cancel. Oh, because I went back to open. What I didn't do is I did not unlock it. So I have to go back and unlock it, because when you go back in time, it's like a time machine. If you go back in time, it's going to go back to what it was at the beginning. So if I had just gone up 1 or 2 to get it back in the window like it should be, that wouldn't have been a problem. But since I went back to the very beginning, it was still locked. So if you're getting an error, always look at what you've just done and see if you can figure it out. Okay, so back to the tool. This tool moves it around, and this tool, this little hand tool, is kind of like the opposite. You can move your whole artboard around. So if you've got it like this and you want to see the whole thing, you're not moving the image on the artboard, you're moving the whole artboard with that. Okay, so they should have those two together, but they don't. Let's go to the crop tool. Have you ever seen somebody that they're talking about making a movie and they put up their fingers like this, as they're thinking about the scene? That's kind of like what a crop tool is. It basically pops in so that it get rid of stuff on the outside. So this tool, this photograph, when we get really close, a way to zoom in really fast is a command and then command and plus, and it gets up really super close. Now you can see pixels, the individual pixels. The command minus right next to it makes it get farther and farther away. Okay, and then command 0 fills your screen. So those are 3 things that you'll probably use a whole lot. Did everybody get that? Okay. Very good. Anytime that I go too fast or I'm not very clear, please stop me. I want y'all to be able to follow what I'm doing. I don't want to just do stuff and then you think, what in the world was that? All right, so back to cropping. This one is a shot out of a La Ventana, a really old La Ventana, as you can tell, because that is certainly not how it looks these days. And so I don't want all that clutter. You can see my keyboard on that. So I want to kind of get this a little bit cleaner and not have so much stuff to clean up too, because I would have a long chore ahead of me. So I am going to use my crop tool. It has kind of a little plus up to the top left hand, if you can see that on your screen. And I'm just going to click where I think I want to start it up in the left-hand corner, or you can start in the right-hand corner, whatever you do. Just drag that box to where you want it to crop. So I'm going to let go of it. And the good thing is you still have the ability to kind of fine tune it. Let's say you didn't like that as well. You just go and drag those corners around and get it fine tuned to where you want it. And then say, done. Okay, there you go. Did everybody crop their photograph? Okay, very good. Now, this is an old photograph. So if you get really close to it, you can see it's got some specks. It's got some weirdness going on in it. And that weirdness is from the printing. When they printed this years and years ago, and of course it would be the same way today, they printed with dots. Instead of it being like a solid grade and it wasn't like that. It was a bunch of dots. And so those dots, when you photograph something that's already been printed, you get a bunch of weird looking dots, which is called a moire. Moire, not a moire, but moire. And it just basically means a strange pattern or a pattern. So there's a really quick, easy way to take care of that. And I'm going to show you, which it's a little off the path of what I intended to do today, but I just remembered I probably should show you that. Go up to your menu filter and come down to noise. Okay? Then go over and choose dust and scratches. This is something that I always use on old photographs. And what it basically does is it kind of blurs. And let me show you. You can really see the difference. I'm clicking the preview on to show you what it's going to look like. And I click off of the preview and you can see what it looks like. So you can go back and forth. And you can slide these. If it's something really bad, you can slide those sliders bigger than just a 1 pixel. But usually 1 pixel will take care of any more rays. Yes, ma'am. I can tell you what it is, and I do this all the time. Ever since it's grayed out, and I know it shouldn't be, had to hold to my layer and make sure I have the layer selected. And then, filter, and it shows it. Is everybody doing good? I'm like so bad with technology. It's not supposed to be a lot. Oh, I hope so. Just hang in there with me. I'm so trying. This is the tool we're using right now. Okay, I'm sorry. So right here, the prompt. Okay. And so there's a. It's on. You can still do it this way. So you just drag and let go of it. There we go. Already. But it won't actually take it. And it's perfect. And then where was the menu? Okay, so the filter. Right, I get that. Okay. No, we're gonna use. This should already have that. Yeah, it should already have one layer in there. Okay. Oh, wait, this is the issue. I'm sorry, just. It's even filter. I don't know why my computer has got things separated. So just that blank, just ignore that blank. Okay, so you need to go and click on your logo and activate that. And then go. And so it's halfway done. The noise, and then that's the charges. So you got another one, oh, that's a great different. So it's. So we're on. We're in the box. Are they using? This control. And I wouldn't fix that, but every time you come in, it's going to be the same issue. Because I box everything. So now do your quality and stuff like that. Okay, anybody else? Thank you so much. Anybody else have any questions? So what the filter. Go up to filter and down to noise, and then dust and scratches.
And then you can see that it makes a difference, or just go, oh, yeah, see, whenever we move that up, it really does make a difference. So just say, okay, and you're ready for the next thing. Okay, everybody,
Should refresh and do something.
no, we don't see nothing.
How'd you get it? Said it was,
I go to noise, to adjust the matches. And then it should be 1 pixel radius, but unless you want to make it really wide, the more pixels you pick, the harder it's going to be. So I usually set I'm just trying to get rid of some lines, scratches and stuff. Okay, so everybody's all good?
Okay, so now I'm gonna just say, okay. And I'm gonna take a kind of a look at this, like what all do I have? So I'm gonna attack the things that are the most obvious to begin with. You know, instead of going for the little tiny fine things, I go for that big slash in the middle, which is the middle of the page. It was 1 page over here and 1 page over here. So it had that crease right in the middle where the gutter is. Okay, so I am gonna use, I don't want that tool anymore. I'm gonna go to, gonna just use my plus and go up here, and I'm going to start at the top. Just might as well, got to start somewhere, so I'm just going to start at the top. So the first tool I'm going to try is the one that's a Band-Aid. It's the Spot Healing Brush, and it's got one of those little fly out triangles on it. So I click on it, and I've got a whole bunch of different choices. I'm going to just start at the top, because honestly, what I'm doing is I'm showing you all the tools I use the most. So I use this one a lot. So I click it. Now this one just does a content aware area. So just make sure you've got content aware, or proximity is fine. Right up there, proximity, so that whatever you're doing, it's going to match the stuff around it, is basically what that means.
I'm not seeing stuff on top where the Band-Aid stuff, that it doesn't open. You know, it's not. Oh, you put it in colors?
Yeah, so this top is the one and don't.
Why would I go?
And that'll okay, everybody got to the spot healing brush? Okay, before we do any cleaning up, I want to tell you about brushes.
Brushes, you can make these as big as you want them. You can make them as small as you want them. And you could go up here and pull down that 30, where it said, mine says 35, here you may say something. Right there.
So pull that little mini down. And you see, you can change everything with this. You can, the bigger the number, the bigger around your brush is going to be. Hardness means that if you've got it 100% hard, it's going to be a really hard line. It's going to be like black and white. It's going to just really be hard and crisp. But whenever you're doing something on a fuzzy photograph like this, you don't want a crisp line. That's going to stand out. So I always make my hardness to 0, which means actually it's 100% soft if you want to actually think about it that way. But I go to 0 hardness. So now I can change the size of my brush. Okay, and that's all well and good. Oops. But you've got to have a good size. You'll make a mess if you don't. But I don't like going up there and doing that. So what I do is I use my bracket keys. Do all of you know bracket keys? Make the little symbol up here. bracket keys they're like this. You know, whatever it's kind of like a parentheses, only hard lines. It's kind of like the very edge of a box. So those are bracket keys. And they're up on the right-hand part of your keys, of your keyboard on the third line. There's one, two, and then it's the third line. Good grief. And then there's one key on the very far right, and then there's the two bracket keys. Have you found them? Okay, so now I've got this really big one. My bracket key that's on the left makes it smaller. The bracket key on the right makes it larger. So that way you're not having to go and pull down menus and slide things over. You can do it with just one touch of the key. Does that make sense? Yes, I find the bracket. Okay. Okay. I don't know what happens if you press the buttons. I'm not, I promise. So, you're good? Okay. Everybody found the bracket keys? Yes. All right. And really, we're going really slow here right now because I'm telling you all about so many shortcuts and stuff that I'm not going to have to tell you every time. So just bear with me. I know this is kind of like watching paint dry. Okay, so now we're going to do the healing brush. So this is kind of like a Band-Aid. All you have to do is just click and drag. And I'm not liking the way that that's doing very much. Let me back out a little bit. I still have too big of a brush is the problem. So now with the smaller brush, because it's going around and making it look like everything else around it. And if you have too big of a brush, it's going to start making some really funny looking stuff. So you can, so it's just a hit and miss kind of thing here. Okay, so that's what the healing brush does. So go back to where the healing brush is on the toolbar and click that little triangle and hold it and go down to the thing called patch tool. Now this one I use a lot more than I use that first one. So what you do with this one is, let's say you found something that you want to change. You take it, you click and hold it, draw a little line around it, and it selects, and then you move it to the side. So did you see that? Let me do that again. And it's telling you to move it to the right, but you can move it to the top if you want. You basically move it to wherever you want to use those pixels to hide the pixels that you're trying to fix. And this little bar here, if it starts getting in your way, you can move it over. Okay. So does that make sense? You're selecting an area, and I want it to look like this area. So does that make sense? So that's another tool you've got in your toolbox to fix a photograph that's kind of not so good. But let me show you the one that I use the absolute most. And it actually is probably one of the original tools because it was on here when I started using Photoshop in the 90s. So it's a really basic tool, but it works very well if you know what you're doing. So that is the clone tool. And it looks just like a rubber stamp. You know, like if somebody says, paid on a bill, you know, they've got the stamp, they stamp it. That's exactly what we're doing. The way that a clone tool works is you have to choose what it's going to stamp. So let me explain. Let me undo that. Okay, so that clone tool is right here. You pick the top one because we don't want to put a pattern. You might use that for something else, but we don't want to put a pattern on it. So you can't just go out here and start clicking because you haven't chosen its original, what it's going to be stamping. So you have to do another step before. So I'm going to say, okay. So I'm going to pick about right here. The reason I'm picking right there is because there's a lot of room around it that looks really similar to what I want to do. And so you go to the Option key and you
press the Option key and you get that little target looking symbol. Can y'all see that? It's a circle and a circle with the crosshairs in it. And you click the mouse. So that means now that you have an area that you're going to move somewhere else. And you can kind of see it, especially if it's, I've got it over a tree and you can see that it's not like the tree at all. So that's my target. So I move it over to this spine and I start moving some of those pixels. And the beautiful thing is, it doesn't stay in the place where you clicked it. It moves at an exact distance from your clone tool as whenever you move it. You set the spot and that spot is stationary. It goes with the tool. It doesn't stay where you clicked it, if that makes any sense. So to prove what I'm talking about, I'm going to change my target area. So there's some kind of line going on right there. So I'm going to bring it over here and see it's moving with me. You can see that little plus over there that's moving with me. Okay. And you press the option. Then you hit, once you press the option, you click on the mouse. You've selected the area you want. If you want to pop it, it'll get it quick. Then they let go of the option. And now you can, now you see that's better. It gives you a preview too. So what you can use, what it is, and then move it to where you want it to be. So you put this option on it, and then click on the mouse, and now, and then move it to something that's wider, and now you can see that you know that little small section. Everybody good? So I'm going to take this one more step because I have, in the vast number of years I've done this, I have time and time again got to a position where that I have gone down the wrong road on my touch-ups. Let's say I start getting a pattern in trees or the clouds or something, and it's looking really obvious that I've touched it up. And rather than me going back to the history, which only has 50 spaces in it, I might just be out of luck and have to just close it and start all over again. So what I do now is called non-destructive editing. And non-destructive means that first layer, that one that we first opened, remains untouched because everything that we've been doing so far has been changing the pixels. I'm going to show you how to do it on another layer and not change pixels underneath, but still touch up. So, with all of that being said, I go to my layers. And my layers has a little plus sign in the bottom with a box around it. And that's how you create a new layer. You can go up to this pull down menu and say new layer, or you can do the new layer shortcuts. But if I've got an icon, I kind of like to use those. So I click the plus and I get another layer. And notice that new layer goes on the top. It always goes, all the new layers go on the top. Okay, has everybody made another layer? Okay, very good. Now, the thing about layers is if you decide that you want to move a layer, you can just go over to it, click, hold, and pull, and you can move that layer wherever you want it. So that'll be handy in the future, but anyway, back to the point. I still have my clone tool chosen. And I am going to go to where there are some really hard lines in my photograph and show you how great this is. So I'm going to choose like right here, and I've clicked with my option down. I'm taking that roof over here. And now I'm able to just go down like that. If I have a window that I want to fix, I can click on the top of the window, come over here, get it lined up, and then it just copies it. So y'all try doing that. But, and I'll show you why I like the layer. Oh, there's one other thing I forgot to tell you. Whenever you're on the second layer, make sure that you have the button current and below checked. Otherwise, it's not going to do this. This right here, pull that down and choose current and below.
Yeah.
The reason I had all of you to change that is because it was set on current layer only. That's the default. But if you change it to the current and below, that means not only are you going to clone what's on the layer that's on that you're working on, it's going to clone what's below it as well. So that's the way that this works.
So I'm going to tell you why I like to use that. If you take your hand and go to the layer 0 and click, you can see that you have that stuff on that layer. So let's say, I'm going to just do something goofy here. Let's say you've done something and you've really messed it up and it's not what you wanted. And it's like, and if you did that on the layer and you changed the pixels, that means that you would have to do a lot of undoing. You have to go to the history panel. You might even have to start over. But if you do it non-destructively, it's only on this layer. So you can go there with your eraser tool, which is down here, and you can erase all of that. And this eraser tool works with the bracket keys too. You can erase that, and then you can start over. Instead of having to undo everything, you can start from scratch. So does that make sense? It makes a bigger file. The files end up being a whole lot bigger because it has more stuff with more layers, needs bigger. But it will save you so much time. I used to do things so that they were permanent. You know, when I worked at housing, I worked at University Student Housing. And if somebody was wearing a Texas shirt in a really good photograph, the people who I was answering to wanted to change it to a Texas Tech shirt, or at least a red shirt. So I was continually switching out shirts on people just to make them so that we could use the photograph, because you don't want to have an advertisement for Texas Tech University with someone with a Texas shirt in the photograph. So I was doing things like that. I was moving things around. I was really feeling like I knew what I was doing, but I was working destructively, which meant that if something wasn't to their liking, I would have to go back to the very beginning because it was all tied together. I was flattening, and that makes everything into one layer. And I was stupid. That's what I was.
And there was a time that someone said, oh, you know, I don't really like that black shirt. Let's put a red shirt on. And it's, oh my. And so a day later, I had it fixed. So whenever you do the non-destructive, you can say, okay, and you can go and fix it within like 5 minutes. So if you are in a situation where you're doing a lot to a photograph and you don't know if it's going to be approved or not, think about doing it in a non-destructive way. Okay. So what I want y'all to do is I want y'all just to play with those tools. You can use the clone tool. You can go back to layer 1 and use, pardon me, and use the, where did it go? Oh, there we go. You can use the spot healing brush. You can use the patch tool. You can even try some of these others if you want, except for the red eye. There's a red eye is a very specific tool that only takes care of people who's, if you look straight into a flash, sometimes it'll make your eye red. Most of the cameras these days don't allow that to happen. But if you've got an old photograph and somebody's got really bright, shining red eyes, that you can fix it with this. But that's the only thing that's good for. So I just want y'all to play for a little bit. You can use the 1 layer, you can use 2 layers, whatever you want to do. I just want you to get comfortable.
So it was working on a bunch of.
Oh, I thought we should. So, yeah, you mentioned. But now it should work.
All the settings are gonna stay. You're gonna put that.
That is just where I want everybody to be. If it were me, I would make it so that we're rewriter with the service. That's not how they, that's not how they do it. So. But y'all are not gonna have to turn these in. These are just for you to practice on. You know, if you want to, you can save them on your thumb drive and you can work on them later if you need to practice and go over it again. You did okay? thumb drive or
Leave it open, whichever you want to do. And let's go to the next one. Now, this one is going to be the same thing. It's the crop and touch up A1. Just in case y'all haven't figured this out yet, I love cat photos and I love old photos. So I hope y'all are okay with using those because I think they're the most fun to work on. Okay, so we have another photograph, but this one is out of a photo album and somebody's written on it, and it's an old photo. What can I say? So what I'm going to do is first work on how it's cropped because I don't really care. I mean, in a family genealogy sort of way, it's very good to know who it is. But since that's not something that we care about right this second, I'm going to just crop it. So you use the crop tool and select your crop and then say, saving files. So it's gonna hold up the button. That's gonna be really cool. So maybe by then I'll have this fixed. You sure do. You did a good job.
You can use the same stuff and get rid of it, like cracks.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so just go ahead and close that. I'm gonna open up this little kid on a tricycle.
All right. And then it's just going to be the same sort of thing. Use the different tools that you have to go in and touch it. I've got my healing brush right here. So this one should, oh, that one is really doing terrible. If you don't like the way that things are doing, you can actually change the kind of thing that you're using. But usually if it's not doing what I want it to do, I just go to a different tool. So I'm going to go to patch tool to try and fix this mess that I just made. Okay, that's much better. So just play with this one for about 5 minutes and then we'll move on to another thing.
Yeah. And layers of water.
Are y'all ready to move on to something else? Okay. And if I'm going too fast, y'all tell me and I will go at whatever pace everybody wants me to go. So the next one is the levels. And I've got a bunch of those. We may not get into every single one of them because I just wanted to have some different examples, but those are there for you to play with and practice with if you want to. So let's just start. I'm going to start at the bottom, I think, because it's a little bit different. Okay, so let's do that last one, the B3 levels. Okay, so you see it's a color photograph, but you know how old photographs are. That's my brother, and he's older than me, so you can only imagine how old that photograph is. But the colors are just not quite right, and it looks a little fuzzy and everything. It's an old photograph. But there are things we can do to adjust it. If you will go to your layers and go straight up to where it says adjustments, there's a little tab. Just click on that and it will open up. And this may be closed. Just click the single adjustments and we're going to go to something that will fix a photograph no matter what it is. If it can be color, it can be black and white. It will improve a photograph enough to make it passable. So click on levels. And what happens, whoa, I'm on the wrong part. You get this histogram. Are all of you familiar with histograms? Okay, it's basically just a graph.
You know, whenever you have to do some research and something like that, we start getting all these kinds of graphs that show the information. And I'm sorry, but Photoshop has that in it too. But we don't use it like we do in statistics. Basically, what we've got here is a histogram. The 255 number over here indicates the white portions of the photograph. The 0 indicate the black portions, the ones that are the darkest. And in the middle, that's the midtones. So there are two different ways to approach this. I will show you the more scientific one, and then I'll show you what I do. These little droppers on the left-hand side of that histogram indicate, are the droppers where you choose what is your light, your middle, and your dark colors. Okay, so I'm going to start with the light. So I need to search in this photograph where I want the lightest thing to be. And I think it's going to be his little white t-shirt. So that's going to be my white. That's going to be what is the white area. So now I'm sorry. Oh, sure. Let me do that. Undo. Okay. So you note, and you'll look at the histogram while I do this. I've picked the widest part of his shirt I picked the bottom dropper. I go to the part that's the very widest in the photograph, or the thing that I want to be the lightest, and I click with the dropper. And notice there's some stuff that happens over on this histogram. Some of the points moved, and so now we've got some white lines that are going down. Then the next thing you choose is the darkest. So I go to the very top one, select that one, and I'm going to go out just a little bit. So many different places I could choose. I think I'm going to choose really low on his blue jeans, like about right in here. That's pretty dark. So I choose the dark, and now the histogram goes crazy. It has all kinds of points that have gotten less in there. And then I'm going to take this middle one, and I'm going to decide what's middle. I mean, there are scientific ways you can pick where the middle gray is. Have any of you taken photography yet? You have. Okay, so you've heard of middle gray, right? 50% gray. That's the color we're looking, I mean, that's the value we're looking for. Since this is a color photograph, there won't be the 50% gray, but there will be like that very mid-tone that's right in the middle between the dark and the light. And so I'm going to choose that, like maybe these mountains back here.
Oh, wow. You can see that the colors went completely crazy. And look at that histogram. It's going everywhere. Okay, so that is the scientific way to do it. I don't like that way, and maybe I'm doing something wrong. I'm not sure, but I just don't like doing it that way. And you can see how much difference it made. You can poke the eye and see what it is and what it was. Or you can go to the next one and you can just reset it. And now you've got your original histogram back. Here's what I do, and it works for me very well. I want to get information over all of these little buttons. So right now, as it sits, there is nothing over the black one. There's nothing over that, the very darkest areas. That means that we don't have a fully saturated black. So I take my cursor, I click on it and hold, and I drag that so that it's actually within some of the information. And I go ahead and adjust this white too. I want to make sure that it has plenty of information above it. And then the center one, I drag to, do I have another layer there? I'm on the wrong layer. See, it wasn't doing anything. If you aren't seeing a difference, you know that you're on the wrong layer. So I've got to activate that bottom layer. And let me try this again. Levels. Okay. So I've moved these two, but the middle is not really giving me much difference. So I'm going to go over here and you can see there's somewhat of a difference. Okay, so that's the way I do it a lot. This photograph is really not that far off, but that's the way I use levels. I just do the sliders so that, and we'll do a couple more so that you'll see what I'm talking about. And here is a third and final way to do this. If you know that you have a photograph that's kind of flat and you need to pop up the whites and pop up the darks, on levels, the way you do it is like what I just showed you, or you can hit auto, which does a pretty good job most of the time. And now let's see. Yeah, I think auto did a better job than I did. Okay, so that's all I'm going to do in this one. So we can go, y'all can play with that one if you want to. I'm going to not save it. Going to open the I'm going to go back up to the very top, the B1. Okay, like I said, cat photos. So this photograph is a really funny photo, I think, but it's so flat. It's just, it looks like there's a gray film over it. It's just not very good. So I'm going to try levels with this. So I'm going to go to adjustments and I'm going to pick levels. And this time I think I'll just try auto. Let's just try auto and see how it does. You can always undo it. Let's go back to adjustments. It just didn't get there with auto. So I'm going to go back to the original settings and I'm going to do my thing where I drag. So I'm going to drag it a little bit this direction. I'm going to drag it a little bit this direction. And you need to do it by eye. By the time that you've done this a few times, you'll be able to start seeing, oh, that looks so much better. And then this one, I just lighten it up a little bit because if I'm going this direction, it gets lighter and lighter. And if I go that direction, it's darker and darker. And you can move these all around and redo it. It's not something that you are stuck with. So now let's go from that one to that one. Does that make sense? It's just a matter of sliding the sliders one side to the other to see. Okay. It's not like the touch-up ones. So let's go to the next one. I'm going to go to B. Oh, let's see what that is. Oh, it is a separate photograph. I've got those named wrong. See how confusing it is when you have something named incorrectly? And I just did something there that I need to tell y'all how to do it because you may or may not know it. I apologize if you already do. If you are trying to open something, or if you are just looking in a regular window like that, and you select, if you click the space bar, it will give you a really big preview so that you don't have to go to the time of opening up something and wasting time like that. You can pick the photograph you want by hitting the space bar. And if you hit the space bar again, it goes away. Okay. So here's another cat one that is not very, it's pretty flat. Going to use levels on it again. And those are way off. So I'm going to move this white button up a little bit on that, and then some on the, it's just if you like a darker photograph or if you like a lighter photograph, it's just to your taste. But just watch and see what it does whenever when you're doing it and how much of an improvement you've made. You know, I've many times thought, oh, this photograph is perfect when I first open it up. And then I start doing some adjustments to it and realize how much better it is after the adjustments. So that's that. And then let's open one last one. This photograph I absolutely love. I have no idea who this is. It was one of my husband's photographs that his mother had, and she didn't know who it was either, but it's just such a beautiful photograph. I just was blown away when I saw it. But anyway, this one, I want you to adjust the levels, and you might even go in there and do a little touch up too. I want you to take about 5 or 6 minutes to do that. So I want y'all to do this one on your own. Sure, go right ahead.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. That photograph might have been the wedding day photograph. Maybe it's the rest. Either that or really important date. Alrighty, let's go ahead and go to the next thing. Which is brightness. Okay, so let's do C1. And this is an adjustment that's different than levels. It changes different things, and so you just kind of have to try one and then try the other sometimes. So I'm just going to show you what brightness and contrast do. So it's the very top one. You click it, and you can slide. What I like to do when I'm trying a new tool is I like to slide it all the way to either side to see what I get, what the absolute maximum is. And then I kind of bring it down to where I think it's about where I want it. And then the same with the bottom one. So I would probably leave it about there. And we can look at that. That was taken at a party that was it was kind of a dark room, and it was like we were all like our favorite rock and roll character, and they had big spotlights and all that kind of stuff. So that's why the coloring is so bad. You will never get this to look like a normal color photograph because it didn't look normal when it was taken. But you can brighten it up so you can see some of the details. And so that does a pretty good job of it. So just use those brightness and contrast and just play around with them a little bit. And you might even try the auto just to see what it does. Oh, it did a completely different thing than I did. I think I like the auto better. And it's okay because auto is run by AI, and so it does do a good job sometimes. Don't feel bad about using auto. Know how to use it manually, but auto is not a sin, believe me. It's really the bottom line is to do it the very best you can, right?
feel satisfied?
Let's close this one. See. Okay, another cat photo. And this one, in my opinion, looks pretty well, it looks pretty good. But let's do a little contrast and brightness on it and see if we can't make it better. So you can brighten it up or make it darker. Make it a little more contrast. It starts getting kind of gray if you go too far. Just kind of slide it till you think it looks pleasing. And you can turn the eye off and see how much you've changed it. Just like we did before. Or you can use auto, which I really don't like auto this time. Just doesn't quite do enough, in my opinion. Anyway, y'all play with that for a minute. In the PowerPoint, that we were going to do curves too, and I think I'm going to do curves next class too. But let's go ahead and I'll just preview the curves for you because that one's a little more complicated. So what I want to do is I want to go to my history and go back to open. So now I'm at the very beginning again. I've gotten rid. We can look at the layers, and I've gotten rid of all of those adjustments. So curves, this is kind of the more sophisticated tool that people use a lot. And it also has a graph, of course. So I'm going to go to adjustments and curves. Its icon is even a graph. And I use it sometimes, and it works pretty well for some things. And this one would probably be pretty good too. There's a couple of ways you can do it. You can do the sliding method, like I was showing you with levels, by going to RGB and pulling down and just going to like the red, and then looking at the graph on the red. And if it doesn't have very much information above it, you can move it over just a little bit and just do it like that. And then go to green and do the same thing. This one has a big gap here, a little bit there. And then we can go to blue and make sure that everything has some information above that little slider. Now we can look and see how we did. It's absolutely better. Okay, so I'm going to undo all of it and go back up and hit auto. And you can see how this thing has gone from from one corner to another line to kind of a curved line. And that's what you want it to do. I don't think I like it as well as my original, but anyway, that's how you do curves. I really depend on auto a lot on curves because it is pretty complicated. And if you start sliding things, a lot of people go up here and start grabbing the curve here and start doing some weird things with it. And you can really, I don't have it on, you can really go bad quickly by doing that. So depend on sliding the little numbers on the RGB or hitting auto for that one. And we'll do more of this. You can make some really funny effects. You don't have to make a photograph look good. You can give it some really dramatic effects with these adjustments too. Okay. Don't save. And that's really all I had today. Let me double check because I have slept since I did this. Yep. That's all.